Tonight, as the world softens into sleep, there's a secret waiting beneath your pillow. A story older than kings and carved deeper than any border. Imagine, in Jerusalem, under ancient stones, they wait for David's heir. In Iran, through candlelight, they pray for a hidden Imam to return. Two bloodlines, tangled in prophecy, hope, and the hush of coming miracles, quietly shape wars and peace, dreams and destinies. What are they truly waiting for? Why do secrets from foregone times sift still like whispers through the streets and tug at the very edge of tomorrow's headlines? Cocoon yourself in comfort, settle into the mystery, and let me lead you through hidden histories, untold connections, and the soft, chilling thrill of ancient hopes still held like treasure. Imagine yourself in the winding alleys of Samarra, Iraq, during the fading twilight of the 9th century. The air is laced with jasmine and wood smoke, and the calls of merchants are slowly replaced by the rhythmic prayers at dusk. Here, in a city, watched over by riverbanks and colourful palaces, a boy is born whose future will be concealed in thick layers of secrecy and sorrow. The line of Imam's descendants from Prophet Muhammad through his daughter Fatima bore not just spiritual leadership, but heavy burdens, political surveillance, shifting alliances, and the constant threat of assassination marked every year. The Abbasid caliphs, themselves rulers by faith, eyed these Imams with suspicion, fearing rivals with a claim to divine legitimacy. By the time Hassan al-Askari, the 11th Imam, lived, his every movement was watched. In these tense, lamplit evenings, it is whispered that a son was born to Hassan, named Muhammad al-Mahdi. Few would see the child, and even fewer would know his fate. But in these little watched moments, between check-ins by the Caliph, spies, the seed of a story was planted that would one day bloom into revolution. The constant struggle between keeping secrets and keeping hope alive set the stage for something extraordinary. In the soft glow of oil lamps, behind walls thick with secrets, a small group of the 11th Imam's most trusted companions were told of a birth the outside world would barely witness. Only select confidants were permitted to meet the boy, Muhammad al-Mahdi, the 12th in a sacred line, whose very existence was considered both blessing and peril. The Abbasid authorities, fearing any rise in Shi'a power, frequently raided the Imam's household. Records speak in quiet tones, never explicit, never detailed, of the child spirited away from prying eyes. His early life passed like a ghost in the corridors, a lesson whispered here, a prayer uttered only in safe company, a cloak always ready for unseen visitors. And then, suddenly, a ripple in the night. At only 5 years old, the young Muhammad's father passed away under uncertain circumstances. The child, now the Imam by inheritance, mysteriously vanished, taken, it is said, into occultation. Some believe he escaped through secret passageways, aided by loyal adherents. Others claim he simply faded from sight, hidden by divine will. It was the beginning of a great silence. Yet, the story and the hope did not vanish. Instead, they moved quietly through the dreams of the faithful, preserved in cautious letters and coded prayers. A Messiah was gone, but not lost, a legend just out of reach. Imagine the silence that settles over a household after a child's hurried disappearance. The anxious glances, the coded whispers in doorways, the longing woven into every prayer. As the years unfolded after Muhammad al-Mahdi's vanishing, a new chapter began, one that would stretch across centuries and lands. The great occultation, the Shi'a community, suddenly, without the living presence of their Imam, faced confusion and heartbreak. Yet, from the stillness, hope took new form. Trusted deputies claimed to receive messages from the hidden Imam, relaying guidance and comfort. Letters known as Taqit were delivered through hidden channels, couched in metaphors and gentle instructions. Families passed down tales of fleeting, mysterious encounters. Someone glimpsed in the crowd, a stranger offering wise counsel, a dream that lingered far into the morning light. The rhythm of their lives changed. Faith became an act of patience, of waiting for a promised return. This era, the occultation, was not about absence, but about enduring hope concealed within ordinary life and outside. The world carried on. Caliphs rose and fell. Empires shifted. Wars thundered on distant horizons. But quietly, beneath these waves, a current of longing persisted, wrapping around scholars, poets, and peasants alike. The 12th Imam had vanished from sight, but his invisible thread bound the hearts of the faithful ever more tightly. As silence settled in and the Imam retreated into legend, a peculiar transformation took root among his followers. With no visible leader, the responsibility of guidance slipped to a new class, the scholars and jurists, known as the ulama. These learned men became the custodians of hope, custodians of the stories and interpretations that would preserve the vision of the hidden Imam. Imagine rows of students in the dusty courtyards of ancient cities like Qam and Najaf, leaning in, hanging on every careful word as teachers expounded the subtleties of the law, the history of the Imams, the duties of the faithful in an age of waiting. Debates unfolded slowly, always with an undercurrent of reverence for a messianic presence lurking just beyond the veil of the visible world. It was, in many ways, a life of perpetual rehearsal, a careful tending of rituals, rules, and traditions, each one a tiny spell meant to keep the possibility of return alive. The ulama, scrupulously neutral in the storms of politics, became shepherds of a longing they themselves could never entirely satisfy. And so, the centuries drifted by with a gentle rhythm. Prayer and study, mourning and anticipation, the slow accumulation of commentary and interpretation. These silent scholars sustained the community's tether to its missing heart, a faith waiting for history itself to shift. Even as the centuries rolled gently toward forgetfulness, the hidden Imam remained a quiet fixture in the tapestry of everyday belief. For many Shi'a Muslims, the Imam was never truly absent. Instead, his presence shimmered subtly at the margins of waking and sleep. Stories passed from grandparent to child, from hermit to merchant, spoke of miraculous encounters at crossroads or in the hush of the marketplace. At times of deepest need or gravest danger, an unknown figure, impossibly wise or kind, would appear, deliver guidance or rescue, and then vanish as quietly as he came. Was it the Imam, or merely the echo of longing shaping the minds of the faithful? Often, no answer was sought, just the comfort that hope brings when reality cannot. The rhythm of their lives was occasionally punctuated by dreams, vivid and luminous. People would wake with unfamiliar peace, convinced that the Imam had visited to reassure them through dark times. In these stories, the boundary between myth and memory softened. The world itself seemed somehow porous, touched by the promise that destiny, though delayed, had not been denied. Meanwhile, the slow turning of seasons continued. Harvests gathered, prayers murmured, children born and named after the vanished died. Through these gentle cycles, belief itself became an act of subtle resistance against absence and uncertainty. As the hidden Imam's physical presence faded into legend, his followers did not simply resign themselves to silence. Instead, a delicate system of correspondence blossomed, a fragile yet vital thread between the unseen guide and his waiting. Flocked imagined the arrival of a trusted messenger in the cloistered back room of a scholar's home. The messenger carries a sealed letter, its parchment faintly scented of far-off ink and hope. These taqit, believed by many to bear the Imam's very hand, were carefully unrolled and read with hushed reverence, guidance delivered with exquisite subtlety, answers to disputes, encouragement during hardships, reminders of patience. Only a chosen few intermediaries, the so-called 4 deputies, claimed authority to receive and transmit these precious messages. Their identities were both public and carefully screened, each one operating under the burden and privilege of keeping the community's hope alive, while shrouded in secrecy. Through these clandestine exchanges, a new tradition of leadership was knit from trust and anticipation, with each generation yearning for closer contact with their hidden Redeemer. The letters and the belief in their authenticity became not just a sign of leadership, but of a community's refusal to let the dream of return be extinguished by time. And so, with each missive delivered and read in the flickering light, hope lingered, refusing to fade, even as the world outside seemed to move on. As the 10th century dawned, the delicate thread of correspondence finally frayed. With the death of the 4th and final deputy, the Shia community entered what would become known as the Major Occultation, a silence vast and undisturbed, stretching. Now for over 1,000 years, no further letters arrived. The comfort of secret messages vanished, leaving the believers to navigate a new era, one in which the Imam was no longer accessible even by proxy. It was both loss and challenge, a test of patience so delicately intertwined with faith that waiting itself became a kind of worship. Life during the Major Occultation was marked by an expanded role for the scholars. The learned men of Qam and Najaf, as well as smaller communities scattered from the Middle East to Central Asia, assumed the task of interpreting law, resolving disputes, and preserving ritual, all in the name of a guide who remained absent, yet ever present in anticipation. But this was not a time without movement. The rhythm of their lives slowed, but it did not halt. Every generation held out hope that the Imam would reappear in their time, that some great cosmic sign would mark the end of waiting. Stories retained their grip. Farmers sowed fields, imagining the Imam's return, bringing justice and abundance. Artisans finished prayers with a whispered plea for his appearance. In the hush of each evening, as lamps flickered in shadowed rooms, the absence became a feature of life itself, a waiting that was as alive, as present as breath. Across the centuries of the Major Occultation, patience and hope were tested time and again. The absence of the Imam left a space within the community, a space that, from time to time, others sought to fill. There were individuals, some sincere, some driven by ambition, who claimed to be the Mahdi himself, or asserted special knowledge of his imminent return. Local landscapes, from the green hills of Gilan to the bustling ports of the Persian Gulf, became stages for these unfolding dramas. Small groups would gather in shadowy courtyards and remote villages, captivated by charismatic leaders who wove ancient prophecy into promises of social renewal or revolt against injustice. Some movements were swiftly quelled, leaving only whispers behind. Others inspired rebellion, fueled by hope for an age of justice, or, at times, by cunning manipulation. Yet, through every wave of such claims, the mainstream current of Shia belief remained steadfast. The true Imam would not be mistaken. His return would come unmistakably, a revolution of hearts and worlds, not merely the rise of another power seeker. For ordinary believers, these moments were at once exhilarating and unsettling. New names appeared in prayers. New rumors circled in the markets. Each movement tested the boundaries between legitimate hope and restless longing, making the line between myth and movement ever more delicate. And yet, after each fervor faded, the rhythm of daily life and the deeper, steady waiting always returned. With the dawn of the 20th century, the world shifted. Empires fell, technologies advanced, and nations emerged from the shadows of history. Yet for Iran and for the heart of Shi'a Islam, the silent longing for the hidden Imam took on an unexpected, transformative form. It was now, in the midst of political strife and foreign domination, that a quiet revolution began to simmer. Scholars became activists. Rituals of waiting turned into blueprints for political change. Nowhere was this transformation more dramatic than in the life of a scholar known as Ruhollah Khomeini. Imagine seminaries in calm alive with debate, whispers of injustice carried on the wind. Khomeini and his followers reimagined the age-old waiting, not as quiet endurance, but as a call to action. Their vision: the world need not be passive while waiting for the Imam. Instead, pious jurists could govern in his name, creating a society ready to receive him. Waiting became a revolutionary act, a subtle but seismic change from patience to determined preparation. This idea, known as Wilayat al-Faqih, the guardianship of the jurist, would later serve as the philosophical backbone of Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution. The rhythm of centuries-old longing now beat with a new political urgency, reshaping not only belief but the course of a nation. As 1979 unfolded, the slow, steady tide of history broke open in a flood of passion. The streets of Tehran resonated with the echo of a million footsteps. Banners rippled in the winter wind, and the old monarchy gave way to an entirely new kind of governance, one rooted not in the distant, hidden Imam, but in the living authority of his appointed jurists. Khomeini's revolution did not claim to bring back the Mahdi, but it changed the rhythm of waiting forever. Prayers for the Imam's return now flowed alongside speeches and laws. The expectation of justice became inseparable from the machinery of the state itself. Iran, reborn, declared itself a nation in readiness, its rulers, stewards, until the hidden Imam would return to complete the work they had begun. The influence of the 12th Imam's absence became not merely spiritual but institutional, woven into the constitution, tracked through the country's politics, referenced in times of war and peace. The belief in his return, and in the necessity to act justly in his name, delivered the nation a unique kind of hope, delicate, fierce, and firmly tethered to the oldest dreams. Yet even now, in the hush after revolution's roar, Iranians continue to wait. The rhythm of their lives moves with the steady cadence of expectation, balanced between earthly struggle and unearthly promise. The Mahdi, hidden but not forgotten, remains the silent heart of the nation's story, a mystery carried forward on the breath of every prayer. As the waiting deepened in Iran, quiet yearnings for a harbinger of change echoed farther west. In the hills of Jerusalem, and deep within the libraries of Jewish mysticism. Here, in shadowed chambers and cluttered scriptoriums, scribes and seekers whispered of another Messiah, the son of David, heir to an ancient promised throne. Imagine scholars poring over parchment in candlelit rooms, parsing hidden meanings from cryptic psalms and scrutinizing the tangled genealogies of Israel's prophets. The longing found expression in mystical movements and religious poetry, filtered through the wrinkled hands of wandering rabbis and the journals of dreamers who wandered city streets, waiting for an unlooked-for miracle, though divided by vast deserts, languages, and customs. The Jewish and Shi'a communities shared more than they knew. A hope threaded through history, an expectation that a figure, royal, mysterious, and blessed, would soon step across the boundaries of the ordinary world. Yet beneath the surface, questions shimmered. Why did so many traditions feel the call of a hidden redeemer? Why did these hopes take such parallel forms across worlds so far apart? In the quiet night, it's easy to imagine these questions drifting on the wind, searching for answers across centuries and continents. In the cool, quiet night of medieval Spain or Safed, imagine the air thick with incense as a learned Kabbalist opens the ancient Zohar, the Book of Splendors. By flickering lamplight, cryptic Hebrew letters curve across vellum, revealing secret layers within the Torah. Codes, patterns, glowing hints of an unfolding destiny. Kabbalah, the mystical tradition of Judaism, offered readers a way to draw close to the divine and perhaps to prepare the world for the coming of the Messiah, the Son of David, the long-awaited Redeemer. Was hidden not in the shadows of politics, but inside cosmic cycles. Lost sparks to be gathered, secret names to be spoken in prayer. Every act of kindness, every study by midnight's hush, was believed to quicken the world's return to wholeness. Just as the Shia longed for the hidden Imam, so too did Kabbalists yearn for the return of King David's line. The rhythm of their lives included ritual, song, and meditation, all designed to tip cosmic scales and unveil the Messianic age. They saw history as spiraling cycles, each repetition bringing the world closer to redemption, though the precise moment was always just out of reach. And, always, there remained the lingering sense, somewhere right at the edge of vision. The Redeemer might already be among them, waiting only for the right season, the right combination of prayers and deeds, to step into the light. Imagine a quiet garden in Shiraz, where rose blooms spill their scent into the dawn and the soft chanting of Sufi dervishes rises on the wind. Here, mystics across Islam, not just Shia, but Sunni and Sufi as well, contemplated hidden truths, and the hope that humanity could be lifted, soul by soul, toward a brighter age. Sufi mystics spoke of saints and guides known as Awliya, friends of God whose presence was felt but rarely seen. These hidden ones, some said, prepared the world for the coming of the Mahdi, secretly working good among the people, their identities unknown to all but a chosen few. In their poems and tales, the divine presence shimmered just behind the veil of reality. One could sense it in the laughter of a child, the wisdom of a sage, the silence that follows a prayer. Sometimes the language and hopes of Sufism braided together with those of Jewish mysticism and Shia longing. Tales crossed borders as merchants, poets, and scholars traveled along the Silk Road, sharing hints of secret redeemers and cycles of world rebirth. The rhythm of waiting, a constant struggle between doubt and trust, drew the hearts of those on every side of these boundaries. Even now, verses written centuries ago echo with gentle promise that in the quiet work of the Spirit, the seeds of the world's redemption were always being sown. Within the winding alleyways of Ottoman Jerusalem, or in bustling bazaars along the trade routes of Persia, there grew rare moments of intersection, times when the ideas and yearnings of disparate faiths briefly flowed together. Jewish scholars, Muslim mystics, and Christian pilgrims brushed shoulders in markets or shared silence in ancient libraries. And in these crossroads, we glimpse how apocalyptic belief can transcend boundaries. Both Kabbalists and Mahdists watched for signs: a comet streaking the night sky, a shift in political fortunes, a dream sent by God. Tales sometimes overlapped: legends of lost tribes, hidden kings, and cryptic prophecies rendered in numerology. In Safed, Jerusalem, and Isfahan, the conversations at coffee houses occasionally touched on messiahs and redeemers who would bridge the gap between the fallen world and an age of unity and justice. Sometimes, individuals crossed more than conceptual borders. Converts, translators, and spiritual seekers would sometimes adopt beliefs from the other tradition, perhaps blending the lure of David's throne with the awaited Mahdi or echoing Muslim, apocalyptic poetry in Jewish liturgical hymns. These exchanges rarely resolved uncertainties. Instead, they left new mysteries, teasing at the possibility that the world's secret heart beat beneath many names and stories. In the half-light of dusk, as the city's noise faded, it was not uncommon for neighbors of differing faiths to watch the same horizon, wondering together if tonight, at last, would be the night foretold. Across both traditions, apocalyptic expectations hummed with the anticipation of unmistakable signs. In Shi'a law, prophecies spoke of great tribulations, a world upended by injustice, civil strife, and cosmic upheavals, all heralding the imminent return of the Mahdi. In the hush of villages and the solemnity of seminaries, these predictions became the backdrop to daily worries and aspirations. Similarly, Jewish texts, from the Talmud to later mystics, listed portents of the messiahs: arrival, wars among nations, widespread moral confusion, and the rise of false prophets. The rhythm of hope was accompanied by trembling. Each natural disaster or political shift invited speculation. Was this, perhaps, a signal from the divine? Lists of omens circulated, sometimes spoken with resignation, sometimes in tones edged with dread or anticipation. Yet these signs were rarely direct or comforting. Both traditions warned of an age when the world would darken before dawn, and when the faithful would need to steady themselves with patience, perseverance, and ritual. The rhythm of their lives, now punctuated by global events, a plague, eclipse, a sudden regime change, wove ancient anxieties into the fabric of modern experience. Despite, or because of the uncertainty, stories persisted. People gathered to debate the latest news. Old men nodded knowingly at odd weather, and grandmothers whispered encouragement to the young: endure, for all is unfolding as it must. Beneath the dusty layers of Jerusalem and the buried memories of vanished Persian capitals lie the material echoes of Messianic longing. The ruined stones of the Second Temple, the forgotten mosques of Samarra, and the ancient synagogues of Safed, all whisper of days when every prayer was weighted with the promise of restoration. Archaeologists exploring these sites stumble upon fragments: pottery etched with prayers, talismans carved with the symbols of lost dynasties, coins bearing obscure inscriptions that speak to a desperate hope for deliverance. Excavators work, slowly, reverently, peeling back centuries as if the past itself might yield up some physical token of the world's redemption. In Jewish tradition, the dream of the Messiah is forever entangled with the vision of a restored temple in Jerusalem, a beacon drawing exiles home, a reminder that wholeness once lost is not forgotten. In Shi'a memory, the sacred city of Samarra, with its golden-domed mosque where the last Imam was last seen, is both a place of mourning and the hopeful threshold of return. The rhythm of discovery, the gentle brushing away of dust, the hush that settles when a new inscription is revealed. mirrors the spiritual waiting woven into the people's hearts. Every stone, every relic, every ruin becomes a silent testament to the endurance of hope and the mysteries that still sleep beneath the surface. In both Persian and Jewish mysticism, numbers and letters become portals to the unknown. A subtle architecture built not only of words, but of meanings teased from patterns, associations, and hidden codes. Rabbis and scholars would spend quiet nights mapping out the numerical values of holy texts, searching for secrets that ordinary speech could never reveal. Jewish mystics practiced gematria, a numerological system in which each Hebrew letter corresponds to a number. By adding and comparing these values, they uncovered supposed veiled connections between scripture, the divine name, and the identity of the Messiah. A word or verse thought to have one plain meaning might, through gematria, shimmer with hints of messianic prophecy, whispers of a name or a date when salvation might break through. In Iranian Shi'a culture, the language of coded messages endured. Through esoteric numerology and the use of talismanic letters, mystics devised intricate systems for interpreting the Quran and Hadith, searching for patterns that might predict the Mahdi's return or offer comfort in anxious times. The very act of seeking, of running a finger across lines of ancient script, became a kind of devotion, a rhythmic meditation on hope and connection. For both traditions, these codes did not guarantee certainty. Instead, they preserved the mystery, offering another way to carry yearning safely within the folds of prayer and study. The search for meaning was not just intellectual, but spiritual, a patient weaving, letter by letter, of dreams waiting to be made real. In the deep silence of night, communities both in Old Jerusalem and throughout Iran pause during sacred times. The Jewish Tikkun, Leil Shavuot, and the Muslim Lalat al-Qadr. These are nights of sleepless devotion when prayers rise skyward in quiet longing, and every heart hopes that the awaited Redeemer might step into the world before dawn. Imagine the rhythm of prayer, soft and slow, rising in candlelit rooms. The community gathers close, the air trembling softly with ancient hymns and the murmured reading of holy books. Each word and gesture feels amplified, as if the boundary between heaven and earth has thinned, and the door to hidden realms gently swings ajar. These rituals do not abolish waiting, they make it sacred. In Jewish tradition, staying awake through the night of Shavuot links each soul directly to the chain of revelation and hope for the final redemption. In Shi'a Islam, recitations and supplications during Laylat al-Qadr ask forgiveness and yearn for the Mahdi's return, even as each worshipper is reminded of the Prophet's own vigil in the desert, waiting for guidance. The shared experience of these nights, a community's breath holding in unison, the hush that follows each prayer creates a tapestry of memory, emotion, and longing. They are annual rehearsals for the world's renewal, gentle reminders that, in the cadence of ritual, hope finds its strongest rhythm. As centuries passed and borders ebbed and flowed, both Jews and Shia Muslims found themselves scattered by war, persecution, and the unpredictable turns of fate. The pain of exile, whether from Jerusalem or from ancestral cities in Persia and Mesopotamia, became woven tightly with hopes for rescue and restoration. Picture families in far-flung lands, lighting Sabbath candles in Prague, or reciting du'as in the narrow alleyways of Mumbai. The longing for a redeemer, whether the son of David or the Mahdi, was no longer just a distant theological puzzle. It became, instead, the soft pulse in every ritual, a silent thread of meaning connecting distant generations in both communities. Exile was bittersweet, a constant struggle to uphold lost traditions, to keep language and song alive, and to pass down the dream of return. The rhythm of daily life grew more careful, every custom and story shaped to preserve identity and hope for a future reunion. With one another, with homeland, and with the hidden Redeemer, Messianic tradition itself became a vessel for survival, an engine of resilience that transformed grief and distance into preparation and purpose. In each new land, prayers for the Redeemer became a quiet act of resistance against despair, and a gentle promise that the scattered, the lost, and the waiting would not remain so forever. As the tapestry of geography and centuries unwound into the modern world, the messianic hopes of Jews and Shi'a Muslims found new forms in unfamiliar settings, crowded city squares, political speeches, and the flickering screens of global news. In Israel, the rebuilding of Jerusalem and national rebirth carried echoes of ancient messianic prophecies. Politicians, soldiers, and spiritual leaders debated in public and behind closed doors whether their achievements were precursors to the Messiah's coming or mere chapters in a much longer story. New religious movements emerged, some quietly urging preparation for a visible Messiah, while others insisted that true redemption remains hidden until an appointed, mysterious hour. In Iran, the complex interplay between national identity and longing for the Mahdi grew ever more public. Slogans and posters invoked the hidden Imam as a symbol of justice and resistance. Political leaders, at times, threaded visions of the Mahdi's return through debates about power, loyalty, and the fate of the region. Each crisis, war, sanctions, protest, breathed new life into narratives that the world stands poised on the threshold of transformation. Outside these lands, immigrant communities wove old stories into new surroundings, while scholars, journalists, and everyday seekers all asked, do these ancient longings still shape our world, or have they become just echoes of a distant past? The rhythm of hope persists, adapting, receding, then surging in times of upheaval, even as the modern world hums. With science and skepticism, apocalyptic belief remains an undercurrent, stirring quietly, always promising that, perhaps, the age of waiting may end by morning's light. Now, as we drift further into the gentle depths of night, let us carefully set myth beside history, legend beside evidence. Imagine a scholar's table, scattered with old manuscripts, archaeological reports, and letters from every corner of the world, each a silent witness to hopes that span generations. Here, in the quiet intersection of story and fact, we begin our gentle reckoning. What is known and what remains, perhaps, forever mysterious. The lives of Davidic descendants and the hidden Imam, apparent in centuries of tradition, leave behind little physical trace. Their stories are carried in DNA only metaphorically in customs, prayers, and lineage lists, yet rarely in the form of ancient tombs, signed treaties, or the artifacts prized by museums. Science moves cautiously, sifting for clues in ancient cemeteries and among scattered manuscripts. Sometimes, all that is found is the echo of longing itself. An inscription here, a coin there, always just out of reach of certainty. Fact and faith live side by side, one in daylight, the other in dreams. For every tangible discovery, there are a dozen treasured beliefs, each held gently, with the understanding that mystery is itself a kind of truth. Genealogical claims lie at the heart of both traditions. The promise that a direct descendant of King David, or of Prophet Muhammad through Fatima and Ali, is still present in the world. For centuries, scrolls, and family histories, painstakingly inked by scribes, drew careful lines from biblical courts and Arabian sanctuaries to contemporary clans. Science, where it can, attempts to bring clarity. Historians and geneticists sift the data for corroboration. The search for a Davidic bloodline has never risen above the level of oral tradition. No DNA test can confirm or deny a medieval rabbi's ancient scroll. Similarly, while many families in Persia and Iraq venerate descent from the Prophet's house, their lines most often disappear into the fog of early Islamic history. For every family tree there is a gap, a silent pause where document or certainty is missing. Yet, the power of lineage is not, for most believers, in the flesh and bone evidence. It is, rather, a living chain of meaning, an idea that shapes the rhythm of their lives, binds them to tradition, and offers the possibility that anyone they meet could be undisclosed. Someone with a world-changing legacy. As the world turns, records are lost or questioned. The sacred genealogies remain as stories, resilient not because they are provable, but because they are believed. Below the golden dome of Jerusalem and amid the winding ruins of Samarra, archaeologists work slowly, peeling back centuries with gentle hands. They seek not just treasure, but context. A broken oil lamp, a prayer carved in plaster, the ash of an ancient hearth. With every find, they hope to shed light on the rhythms of devotion, the daily routines, the pulse of empire and faith. And yet, for all the careful digging, the world of the hidden Imam and the Messiah remains elusive. No tomb has yielded a proof of David's final heir. No artifact bears witness to the precise hiding place of Muhammad al-Mahdi. Sometimes, the very absence of tangible evidence deepens the allure. What is hidden, it seems, wishes to remain so. In libraries, scholars unroll brittle papyri and scan medieval manuscripts, searching for references to miraculous events, for letters that might have passed from deputy to deputy. Each discovery, though real, feels at arm's length from legend, a name half-erased, a date that might match a prophecy, or a hint at a meeting place for secret followers. What archaeology gives us, most often, is context. The stones and scrolls confirm how longing shaped architecture, ritual, and law. They bring us closer to the lived realities of bygone centuries, but always, just at the edge of shadow, the central mysteries persist, undisturbed, inviting reverence more than explanation. The steady gaze of the historian, every claim is a puzzle, one to be weighed, traced, and tested. Chronicles from medieval Persia, rabbinic commentaries, and early Islamic texts each offer a patch in the living quilt of Messianic belief. Yet, these are not neutral records, shaped by anxiety, hope, or deliberate concealment. Their voices are often contradictory or incomplete. Testimonies about the birth and occultation of the 12th Imam usually emerge generations after the events themselves. Letters, lists of deputies, and coded notes reflect a world constrained by fear and caution. The same is true in Jewish chronicles, where exile and persecution often shrouded genealogy in legend or encoded hints. When historians lay these stories side by side, gaps appear, ambiguities that no amount of research can fully resolve. Tradition, by contrast, holds these ambiguities with gentle hands. At night, when the world is quiet, the oral recitation and ritual commemoration of these mysteries weave a truth that need not submit to evidence. The rhythm of scholarship is deliberate. Each new paper, each tentative conclusion, is followed by respectful silence. For every certainty gained, a dozen questions remain unanswered. Fact and legend in this gentle dance become companions, each giving depth and color to the other. Beyond archaeology and written record, modern science offers its own gentle lens, one that peers not only into ancient tombs, but also into the hearts and minds of believers. Psychologists, sociologists, and anthropologists listen closely to the rhythm of longing, the familiar dance between hope and memory that pulses beneath, waiting for a hidden. Studies reveal that messianic expectations are more than dogmatic remnants. They serve as engines of resilience and meaning. For the dispossessed, promises of a returning leader help transform suffering into purpose. Rituals that recall a missing messianic figure, be it the cup reserved at the Passover Seder for Elijah, or the empty place during Shi'a commemorations, act as subtle reassurances, reminders that absence is not the end of the story. Belief in hidden saviors often cultivates patience, perseverance, and communal solidarity. It imbues daily acts, lighting a candle, reciting a prayer, telling a tale at bedtime, with hope for renewal. Even for those who doubt, participating in the rhythm of tradition offers comfort, a sense of belonging, and sometimes a way to manage the unpredictability of history. Science cannot weigh a prophecy or confirm a messianic return, but it gently illuminates how belief itself can carry nations and families through the darkest hours, binding the present to a future still unseen. As the night deepens, let us imagine the hidden places where myth and metaphor quietly shape a people's identity, a soft rhythm pulsing beneath the skin of history. For both Iranians and Jews, the stories of the hidden Imam and the Messiah are not mere tales, but living maps, guiding generations through uncertain territory. Storytelling is an act of orientation. Each retelling of the Mahdi's occultation or David's royal promise offers subtle reminders of hope, humility, and endurance. The Messiah's arrival, forever anticipated yet always deferred, becomes a mirror for personal and communal resilience, a tale to cherish. No matter how many winters pass without a sign, metaphor smooths the sharp edges of waiting. In poetry, the Imam may be likened to the bright morning star veiled by clouds, or the Messiah to a sapling growing unseen beneath frozen earth. These images, repeated from cradle to grave, make patience a virtue and hope an inherited art. Maps, drawn in myth, offer travelers more than direction. They create belonging, connecting each generation to a larger tapestry of meaning. For every longing heart, mythic maps give validity and shape, turning the world's uncertainty from a source of fear into a source of quiet wonder. Across the centuries, rabbis, ayatollahs, and mystics have served not just as teachers, but as custodians of the delicate boundary between certainty and mystery. Their role is to tend to tradition, affirming the ancient stories of messianic hope, while gently guiding communities through times of doubt and transformation. In Jerusalem's synagogues or Qom's seminaries, these leaders have cultivated an atmosphere where questions are cherished as much as answers. Public readings, sermons, and study circles spiral around the mysteries, reinforcing the wisdom of patient expectation and the humility of not knowing. When pressed for specifics, most respond with gentle equivocation. It is not given to us to know the exact times or seasons. This caution preserves space for interpretation, ensuring that the tradition remains supple and alive. Over the years, some leaders attempted to pin hope to a specific date or political event. Usually, these predictions quietly faded, leaving behind the deeper lesson: prophecies may inspire, but they do not rule the rhythm of faith. Instead, ambiguity is embraced, a comforting ambiguity that keeps anticipation alive, but also safeguards against disappointment. By holding open the questions, religious leaders foster a form of trust, which encourages exploration without the anxiety of needing every answer. Thus, the guardians of ambiguity invite each listener to find their own meaning within the stretching silence of history. As empires rose and fell, the ancient longing for redeemers was not left unchanged by politics. Rulers and revolutionaries alike discovered the persuasive power of prophecy, how the promise of a hidden savior could unify, inspire, or at times, steer entire nations. In Iran, the rhetoric of the Mahdi is interwoven with statecraft. Leaders evoke his return in speeches, painting their own rule as custodial, provisional, a stewardship awaiting the Imam's return. This gives political decisions a sacred character, shaping the expectations and resilience of the people. Any hardship born today is recast as preparation for a just future in modern Israel. Themes of the Messiah's coming occasionally rise in political discourse. Historic events, wars, peace treaties, the rebuilding of Jerusalem are sometimes cast in messianic light. Rabbis and political leaders alike walk a careful line, encouraging hope but mindful of the divisions that passionate expectations can sometimes create. Such myth-making is a double-edged sword. When wielded wisely, it strengthens unity and gives purpose. But when faith is pressed too closely into politics, it risks disappointment and disillusionment, especially when destiny does not arrive on schedule. In both states, the rhythm of public life echoes these ancient promises, weaving political reality ever so gently with the music of myth. Behind every headline, the old story quietly persists. The world awaits one who will redeem it, and every action might, just might, hasten or delay that dawn. With the arrival of modernity, its trains, its telegraphs, and its bright electric lights, the rhythm of belief began to change as well. Many found themselves asking new questions. What if the messianic return is only metaphor? What if the hidden guide dwells not in some distant city or bloodline, but within each yearning heart? In Israel and across the Jewish diaspora, secular thinkers and even some religious leaders began to interpret the Messiah not as a literal king, but as a symbol of human progress, justice, or moral awakening. Every step toward social equity and peace, every act that eased suffering, became understood as a tiny piece of redemption. The rhythm of waiting grew quieter, replaced by the steady pulse of practical action and self-improvement. Within Iranian society, especially among the educated and urban classes, a similar shift took place. The Mahdi became less of a future liberator and more of a metaphor for the perpetual quest for justice. Some found comfort in reinterpretation, using stories of the hidden Imam to inspire ethical reform, resistance to tyranny, or simply a more patient, kind approach to everyday life. Yet, even among doubters, rituals and stories retain power. A secular historian might gather for Passover. A skeptical student might light a candle on Laylat al-Qadr. The rhythm of tradition endures, carrying even the quietly doubting along in its gentle current. So, modern skepticism does not erase the old longings. Instead, it weaves them into new stories, each step away from literal belief, perhaps. Another way to shape meaning from the mysteries that refuse to fully fade. As our journey through evidence and legend draws to a close, we return once more to the hush that accompanied our beginning. The hopes for Messiah and Mahdi, however tested by time and change, persist, steady, unhurried, woven into the daily, Fabric of life, historians, scientists, and believers alike now walk the same gentle path, each aware that certainty is rare and that some mysteries must be held, not solved but cradled like a lullaby. The rhythm of longing and ritual, of study and story, makes room for doubt, for wonder, and for the quiet restfulness of not-knowing. In Israel and Iran, beneath the noise of politics and the bright lights of modern cities, the ancient pulse remains. Children grow up whispering prayers for peace, lighting candles against the darkness, and whether fully aware or not, breathing in the gentle comfort of stories older than empires. The night, with its shadows and promise, is where these mysteries feel most at home. They persist not to disturb our sleep, but to guide us quietly toward it. A soothing reminder that the world's most important questions endure, not in noise or certainty, but in the soft, persistent hush at the edge of dreams. Now, as your breath softens and the world outside your window grows quieter, you may notice that the questions we've unwrapped tonight have no sharp edges, only gentle curves, winding back on themselves, lulling your mind toward rest. What became of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi whose absence has shaped empires and inspired silent prayers through generations? Is a descendant of David waiting in the streets of Jerusalem, ready to usher in a new age? The answers shift with the centuries, eluding historians and the hopeful alike. Their stories are not only tales of crowns and thrones, but everyday struggles, of fathers keeping faith in exile, of mothers kindling lamps against despair, of children believing that the world may grow whole again. We have watched as scholars debated, politicians evoked hope, and mystics traced secret codes in dreams and scripture. Archaeologists brushed dust from ancient stones, finding only faint reminders of hopes that refuse to yield to proof or reason. In every tradition, the rhythm of waiting has become part of life's larger tapestry, each thread a comfort, a promise, a pause. As you drift now, eyes heavy and thoughts gently dissolving, allow yourself to be cradled by the knowledge that some mysteries are meant to remain. Messiahs and Mahdis, prophecies and promises. All these stories exist to remind us that life is lived not only in answers, but in wonder, in hope, and in the dreaming patience that bridges darkness to dawn. Tonight, may those mysteries wrap around you like a blanket, soft, ancient, and serene. May the breath of old prayers and the hush of hidden footsteps lull you into the safest sleep. For in the end, the comfort is not in solving, but in seeking together, quietly, beneath the stars. Good night, gentle listener. The secrets are safe with you until morning.